The British royal family, a symbol of continuity and tradition, carries a heavy legacy of power, duty, and public service. For centuries, the monarchy has remained an institution unlike any other, binding the nation to a shared sense of history and identity. But within this prestigious institution, relationships are complex, layered with politics, personal struggles, and, at times, heartbreak. At the heart of this story is Queen Camilla, once the controversial mistress and now the respected queen consort of King Charles III. Her journey into the royal family was anything but smooth. From the very beginning, Camilla's relationship with Charles was met with fierce opposition and public scorn. She was often portrayed as the villain in a saga of love and betrayal that spanned decades. Yet, over time, she carved out a place for herself within the royal family, eventually earning her title as queen consort. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. However, Camilla's rise to power was not without its challenges. Her relationship with Prince William, the future king, was strained from the start. As a young boy, William had witnessed the turmoil caused by his father's affair with Camilla, and the scars of those years never quite healed. The bitter memory of his mother, Princess Diana, and her tragic death in a car crash left William with a profound sense of loyalty to his late mother, which naturally placed him at odds with Camilla. But Camilla, despite the public's harsh judgment, became a constant presence in the royal family, proving herself a steady companion to Charles. Over the years, the royal family gradually accepted her, and she seemed to settle into her new role as queen consort. Her ability to navigate the public eye, managing the delicate balance between royal duty and personal history, made her a formidable figure in the royal court. Yet, behind the royal facade, there were cracks, small but noticeable, that suggested all was not as harmonious as it appeared. Prince William, who had inherited his mother's sense of justice and compassion, always found it difficult to fully embrace Camilla as his stepmother. Though he respected her role within the family, there were underlying tensions that simmered beneath the surface, exacerbated by the unresolved pain of his past. As William grew older, the responsibilities of his royal duties became more pronounced, but his loyalty to the monarchy and his devotion to his father, Charles, never wavered. Still, he always held an unspoken distance from Camilla. To him, she was an outsider, a figure whose presence, while accepted, was not fully embraced. Charles, for his part, always encouraged William to support Camilla, believing that as the future king, he had a responsibility to unite the family. But William's deep sense of duty toward his late mother, Diana, made it hard for him to truly connect with Camilla on a personal level. Her ascension to the position of queen consort had been a quiet victory, but it was not one that William celebrated. It was one thing to accept Camilla as his father's wife, but it was another to accept her as a figurehead of the monarchy. This internal conflict between father and son had always been there, lingering just beneath the surface. Prince William's struggle was not only personal, but also a matter of royal protocol. The pressure to maintain unity within the family and uphold the public image of the monarchy weighed heavily on him. As he moved closer to his own reign, the complexity of the royal family's relationships became more apparent. In the midst of this intricate family dynamic, a letter arrived that would forever alter the course of the monarchy's history. What started as a routine communication quickly became a catalyst for change, one that would tear through the family's carefully curated image and force William to confront the very foundations upon which the monarchy was built. As William read the letter, his world began to shift. He realized that the consequences of Camilla's past actions, which had been kept in the shadows for so long, could no longer remain hidden. The delicate balance that had been maintained for years, the one that kept Camilla firmly in her position, was now under threat. And William, the future king, knew that something had to be done. The letter contained revelations that no one had expected. These were not mere rumors or whispers. They were documented truths that cast a dark shadow over Camilla's rise to power. The very foundation upon which her title rested seemed to be crumbling, and William, who had always been the dutiful son, now found himself facing a dilemma. Should he maintain the royal facade, protecting his father and his family from scandal? Or should he take action, risking everything for the sake of truth and justice? The decision would not come easily. But as the letter revealed its devastating contents, Prince William knew that he could no longer remain silent. It was a typical day at the palace when the letter arrived. Prince William had been in his office, reviewing royal engagements and handling the endless stream of paperwork that came with his royal responsibilities. Little did he know, this letter was not like the others. This was no formal communication or royal invitation. It was a letter that would force him to confront a reality that had been buried beneath years of royal propriety, the shadow of scandal, and the delicate balancing act of family loyalty. The envelope, a simple cream-colored parchment, was addressed to Prince William with a wax seal that, upon inspection, seemed unusual, too personal for a typical correspondence. William opened it carefully, unaware of how this seemingly innocuous letter would change everything. As he read through the contents, the weight of its words hit him like a punch to the stomach. The revelations inside were not merely uncomfortable truths. They were deeply damaging, threatening to unravel everything the royal family had worked so hard to maintain. The letter, it turned out, had been penned by an anonymous source with intimate knowledge of the royal family's inner workings. The writer revealed secrets about Queen Camilla's actions during key moments in her life, long before her marriage to King Charles. These were not small missteps or misunderstandings. They were revelations that painted a picture of a woman who had manipulated situations and people to her advantage, leaving a trail of hurt in her wake. The first detail that caught William's attention was the claim that Camilla had played a significant role in the orchestrations leading to the tragic events surrounding his mother, Princess Diana. It was no secret that the relationship between Camilla and Diana had been strained from the beginning, but the letter suggested something darker. According to the writer, Camilla had subtly influenced key figures within the palace to isolate Diana, using her position to weaken her rival's standing. This wasn't just about love or jealousy. It was about power, and Camilla had been playing a long game. The letter went on to explain how Camilla's involvement in the royal family's decisions extended beyond just her personal relationship with Charles. It detailed how, in the years leading up to Diana's tragic death, Camilla had used her influence to reduce the security detail around Diana, making her more vulnerable to the very people who would ultimately cause her demise. Though the exact details were still murky, the implication was clear. Camilla had done more than just cause heartache. She had actively contributed to Diana's downfall. And now, it seemed, her actions were finally catching up with her. As William continued reading, he found even more unsettling revelations, each more shocking than the last. The letter claimed that Camilla had manipulated the media to paint herself as the wronged woman, carefully crafting an image of herself as a devoted partner to Charles while, behind the scenes, she continued to wield power and control. The author of the letter described how Camilla had used her charm and wit to win over key figures within the royal household, positioning herself as indispensable to the family's image. But this carefully constructed persona was built on lies, half-truths, and manipulation. For William, the weight of these accusations was nearly unbearable. As a son, the idea that his stepmother, someone who had once been a central figure in his life, could have played such a pivotal role in the suffering of his family was devastating. The pain of losing his mother, compounded by the years of public scrutiny, had already left him emotionally scarred. But now, the possibility that Camilla had been involved in more than just a personal affair with his father, perhaps even a calculated campaign to usurp his mother's place, was something William struggled to comprehend. The more he thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces fell into place. The subtle shifts in royal dynamics, the way Camilla had managed to stay in power despite the scandal surrounding her marriage to Charles, it all began to make sense. But the idea that she had been able to do this under the guise of affection and loyalty, manipulating her way into the royal family, left William sickened. For a while, William sat in stunned silence, the weight of the letter's contents pressing down on him. What was he supposed to do with this information? Should he confront Camilla directly? Would she deny everything? Could he trust the anonymous source? Or was this just an attempt to undermine the Queen's position within the royal family? The stakes were incredibly high, and William knew that if these accusations were true, they would not just affect Camilla, they would shake the entire monarchy to its core. In his heart, William knew what had to be done. He couldn't let this go unnoticed. The truth had to come to light, regardless of the cost. The royal family had long been an institution built on secrecy and controlled narratives, but this revelation was different. This was not just about a scandal. It was about the very integrity of the monarchy. For the sake of the family and the legacy of his mother, William understood that he could not remain silent. But how would he approach the situation? Would he confront Charles first, the man who had always stood by Camilla, or would he go directly to the public with the letter's contents? The thought of betraying his father, the man who had tried to rebuild his life after the collapse of his marriage to Diana, filled William with guilt. Yet, as he stared down at the letter, one thing became clear. No matter how painful, no matter how difficult, this was something that had to be addressed. The decision would not come easily. It never does in royal families, where every choice has far-reaching consequences. But one thing was certain. Prince William had just been handed the power to reshape the monarchy forever, and he was about to use it. The royal family is often portrayed as a flawless entity, a picture of unity and grace in the public eye. But behind the ornate walls of Buckingham Palace, the reality is far from perfect. Family dynamics, like those in any other household, are complex, layered with history, personal grievances, and difficult choices. The relationship between Prince William and Queen Camilla was no exception. For years, William had been dutiful in his role as the heir to the throne. He had been raised in the shadow of his mother, Princess Diana, who had shaped his sense of duty, compassion, and loyalty. Diana's death had not only left an indelible mark on William's heart, but had also defined much of his approach to the monarchy. His relationship with his father, Charles, was strained after his mother's death, and despite the years that had passed, the emotional wounds remained raw. Charles's marriage to Camilla had only added to the complexity of their relationship. From the moment their affair had come to light, and even after their eventual marriage, William had found it difficult to fully accept Camilla. He had been forced to watch as the woman who had contributed to his mother's pain was welcomed into the royal fold. For William, the scars of those years could not simply be erased by a title or a few kind words. His relationship with Camilla had always been cordial, but it was strained, an uneasy truce held together by royal decorum and the shared understanding of their roles. Despite this tension, William had always tried to keep a level head. He understood that Camilla was now the queen consort, and that she had a significant role to play in the royal family. He had, out of duty, done his best to keep the peace, attending royal engagements where Camilla was present and participating in family events without making waves. But beneath the surface, there was always an undercurrent of unease. It was clear to those close to him that while William had outwardly accepted Camilla's position, inwardly, he still harbored deep reservations. For Camilla, the situation was no easier. She had long understood that she would never be truly embraced by the public, but her relationship with Charles and her position as queen consort had given her a sense of stability. She had worked hard to establish herself as a supportive and capable royal, one who could handle the public scrutiny and the often unforgiving glare of the media. But Camilla was not naive. She knew the tension between her and William was palpable, even if it was never openly discussed. Camilla had always made efforts to build bridges with her stepson. She had tried to be there for him when he needed someone to talk to, offering advice and comfort during difficult times. But no matter how much she tried, the weight of the past hung between them. The legacy of Diana, the mother who had been so beloved by the public, cast a long shadow over her own position. While Camilla had worked to secure her place in the royal family, she knew that there was one person who could never fully accept her, William. It wasn't that William hated Camilla. It was more that he couldn't fully trust her. The events of the past had left a deep wound, and though time had healed many of the scars, some things were too painful to forget. For years, this tension simmered beneath the surface, often ignored but never forgotten. Now, with the letter in his hands and the decision looming, William's sense of duty to the crown clashed with the personal emotions that had always defined his relationship with his father's wife. The family was becoming aware of the strain between William and Camilla. Charles, ever the peacemaker, had tried to keep the lines of communication open between his son and his wife, but his efforts were often met with resistance. He knew that William's feelings ran deep and that his son's loyalty to his mother would always influence his perception of Camilla. But Charles also knew that the monarchy could not afford to be divided. The family's image, so carefully cultivated over the years, depended on unity, and any sign of discord would weaken the institution itself. Behind closed doors, Charles had often urged William to put aside his personal grievances for the sake of the monarchy. "Camilla is my wife," he would say, "and she is now a part of our family. We must show strength and unity in public." But these words, though sincere, had never fully reached William's heart. To him, it wasn't just about appearances. It was about justice, loyalty, and the preservation of his mother's memory. And while he respected his father, the bond they shared could not erase the deep-rooted feelings that William had about the way things had unfolded. In the wake of the letter's revelations, this familial tension would only grow. The once quiet disagreements between father and son were now on the verge of spilling over into the public eye. Prince William, caught between his loyalty to his family and the newfound truths about Camilla's actions, found himself at a crossroads. As he read the letter over and over again, the weight of his father's position pressed down on him. He knew that any decision he made would affect not just his relationship with Camilla, but the future of the monarchy itself. His choice was not merely a matter of family loyalty. It was a matter of duty to the nation and to his late mother's legacy. William had always understood the importance of the crown, but now, the personal stakes had never been higher. With each passing day, the tension within the royal family grew. William's determination to confront the truth, regardless of the personal cost, was unwavering. Yet, with each conversation he had with his father, he couldn't help but feel the emotional weight of his decision. The monarchy was not just a family. It was a symbol of strength, unity, and tradition. The last thing William wanted was to betray that unity, but the truth was now too powerful to ignore. And so, as the days went on and the tension continued to build, the question remained: would William find a way to reconcile his duty to the crown with his personal feelings? Or would the family dynamic that had held together for so long finally come crashing down under the weight of the past? Prince William had never been one to shy away from duty. From the moment he was born, he was thrust into a world where responsibility was everything. His every move, every decision, was scrutinized by the public, by his family, and by the world at large. He had been trained for this. His entire life had been shaped by the weight of the monarchy. Yet, as he sat alone in his private study, holding the letter that could change everything, he realized just how heavy the burden had become. The contents of the letter had shaken him to his core. It wasn't just the revelations about Camilla's past, though those were devastating in their own right. It was the realization that, for all the years he had spent preparing to lead, he had never truly been prepared for this moment. This wasn't just about royal protocol or public opinion. This was personal. This was about loyalty, justice, and the painful truths of his family's history. William had always known that the royal family was a web of secrets. It was an institution built on tradition and appearances, often hiding its darkest truths behind gilded walls. But what he hadn't anticipated was the way those secrets would affect him on a deeply emotional level. His mother, Diana, had always been a symbol of grace and compassion in his eyes. She had been the heart of the monarchy, the one who made him believe that royalty could be both powerful and humane. And when she was taken from him, so violently and so suddenly, it had left a scar that would never truly heal. In the years since her death, William had carried the weight of her memory like a constant companion. It was always there, in the back of his mind, guiding him through his royal duties. It was this same memory that had made his relationship with Camilla so fraught. He had never fully forgiven her for her role in the destruction of his mother's marriage. The wounds ran too deep, and no amount of royal appearances or polite exchanges could erase the betrayal he felt. Now, with this letter in hand, the truth about Camilla's involvement in the darker chapters of his family's history was laid bare. William could feel his heart racing as he processed each line. The accusations were nothing short of earth-shattering. They painted a picture of a woman who had maneuvered her way into power, using her charm and influence to manipulate not just Charles, but also the entire royal family. It was hard to imagine that the woman he had always kept at arm's length, the one he had only reluctantly accepted as his stepmother, could have been capable of such manipulation. But the evidence was clear. These weren't just rumors. This was something far more dangerous. William's thoughts began to race. What was he supposed to do with this information? The choice before him was not one he had ever imagined facing. To confront Camilla would mean tearing apart the delicate fabric of the royal family, a family that had already suffered so much in the public eye. But to ignore the truth would be to betray his mother's memory, to allow the monarchy to continue to be tainted by the very woman who had contributed to Diana's suffering. The decision was impossible. William could feel the weight of the crown pressing down on him, not just as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of the duty he owed to the monarchy and to his family. He had always known that one day he would have to assume the role of king, but he had never anticipated the personal cost that would come with it. The path to leadership was not just paved with royal titles and privileges. It was built on difficult, often painful decisions. And this was the hardest one yet. In the midst of his turmoil, William sought solace in the only place he could truly find peace, the memory of his mother. He closed his eyes, imagining her face, her warmth, and her unwavering belief in him. Diana had always been his guiding light, the person who taught him the importance of compassion, integrity, and honor. How could he reconcile those values with the political reality of the monarchy? How could he be both the man his mother would have wanted him to be and the future king his family and the nation expected him to become? The weight of the monarchy was never more evident than in this moment. It wasn't just about choosing between two paths. It was about defining who he was as a leader, as a son, and as a man. The decisions he made now would echo throughout history. They would shape not only his reign, but also the future of the royal family itself. The monarchy had always been an institution rooted in tradition, but it was also an institution that had to adapt to the changing world. And as much as he wished things could remain the same, William knew that this moment marked the beginning of something new. The letter was more than just a document. It was a call to action. It demanded that William make a choice, and that choice would have repercussions far beyond the palace walls. As much as he wanted to avoid conflict, as much as he wanted to protect his father and the monarchy from scandal, William understood that sometimes the truth could not be ignored. Sometimes, a leader had to make the hardest decision, even if it meant breaking from tradition, even if it meant causing pain. With a heavy heart, William knew what he had to do. The future of the monarchy, the legacy of his mother, and the integrity of his own soul depended on it. The time for silence had passed. The time for action had arrived. Prince William's decision to confront the truth was not one he made lightly. For days, he had been consumed with the letter's contents, turning them over in his mind like a puzzle that needed to be solved. The weight of the revelations had left him reeling, but the more he thought about it, the more he understood that this was no longer just a matter of family dynamics or personal grievances. It was a matter of integrity, justice, and, above all, duty to the crown. William knew that his decision would not only affect his relationship with his stepmother, Camilla, but would send shockwaves throughout the royal family. The monarchy had long been an institution built on secrecy, silence, and controlled narratives. But those narratives had begun to crack, and William had realized that he could no longer allow the family to hide behind the walls of the palace. If there was any hope of restoring the monarchy's reputation, it would require honesty, transparency, and, above all, action. As he sat in the royal study, the letter still resting in his hands, William felt the familiar weight of his royal responsibilities pressing down on him. The future of the monarchy was at stake, and he knew that the decision he was about to make would shape the future of not just the royal family, but the British people's perception of it as well. There was no turning back now. He had always known that his path to the throne would be complicated. The road to leadership was never straightforward for the heirs to the British crown. William had watched his father, Charles, struggle with his own path to kingship, and he had seen the toll it had taken on him. The pressures, the expectations, the constant scrutiny. It was a life that left little room for personal desires or emotions. And yet, William had always tried to remain true to himself, even in the face of those pressures. He had always hoped that, one day, he could balance his role as a king with the values his mother had instilled in him: compassion, fairness, and justice. But the time for hope had passed. Now, it was time for action. William's thoughts turned to his father, the man who had spent years navigating the treacherous waters of the monarchy, the man who had fought for his own place in history. Charles had always been an advocate for Camilla, standing by her side through the storm of public criticism and media scrutiny. He had fought for her right to be recognized, to be accepted as his wife, and later, as queen consort. But now, with the truth of Camilla's actions laid bare before him, William was faced with an uncomfortable reality. His father's judgment was clouded by love and loyalty. Charles, as much as he loved his wife, could not see the full picture. The weight of that realization hit William hard. He had always respected his father, but he knew that this decision would test their relationship in ways that neither of them could have anticipated. It was a difficult truth to face. As future king, William had a duty to the monarchy that went beyond his personal feelings. The monarchy, with all its traditions and power, was not just a family. It was an institution that needed to endure through time. If the truth about Camilla's actions was ignored, it would only weaken the monarchy's credibility. And William, as the future king, could not allow that to happen. He knew that confronting his father would not be easy. Charles had always been a man of conviction, one who had fought tirelessly for his own place in history. To challenge him, especially on a matter so personal, would be difficult. But William also knew that he could not remain silent. The monarchy could not afford to bury the truth any longer. This was not just about protecting his father or his stepmother. It was about ensuring the future of the crown. The next few days were filled with tension. William spent hours reflecting on his options, speaking with trusted advisors, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. But no matter how much he prepared, he knew that the moment he stepped into the room with his father, everything would change. There was no going back. The day of the meeting arrived, and William knew that he could not delay any longer. He walked into his father's private study, where Charles sat behind his desk, a look of concern on his face. The two men had shared countless conversations over the years, but this one would be unlike any other. "William," Charles said, looking up from his paperwork. "Is everything all right?" William stood before him, the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "Father, I need to speak to you about something important. Something that cannot wait any longer." Charles's expression softened. He knew that his son was not one to speak lightly, especially when it came to matters of the crown. "What's troubling you?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. William took a seat, placing the letter on the desk between them. His hand trembled slightly as he did so, the magnitude of what he was about to say sinking in. "I've received information about Camilla's actions that, if true, could destroy the very foundation of our family. I can't ignore this, Father." Charles's face paled as he looked down at the letter. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice low and filled with disbelief. "Are you accusing her of something?" "I'm not accusing her, but I can't ignore what the letter reveals," William said, his voice steady but firm. "We can't continue to turn a blind eye to the truth. We owe it to the monarchy, and to our family, to face this head-on." For a long moment, there was silence. Charles's gaze remained fixed on the letter, his mind racing as he processed what his son had just said. He had spent years protecting Camilla, shielding her from the harshest criticisms, even when the world seemed to be against her. But now, with William's words hanging in the air, he realized that his loyalty to his wife could no longer cloud his judgment. "I never wanted this," Charles finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to put you in this position." "I know, Father," William replied, his tone softening. "But sometimes, we must make decisions that are bigger than us. The monarchy depends on it." The moment was heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of years of personal and political decisions. And in that moment, both men understood that the path forward would not be easy. But it was the only path they could take. William had made his decision. The truth, no matter how painful, had to be acknowledged. The monarchy could no longer live in the shadows of its past. And though it was a decision that would tear at the very fabric of his family, it was the right one. The royal family was no stranger to the pressure of public scrutiny, but nothing had prepared Queen Camilla for the devastating news that was about to shake her to the core. The moment Prince William had entered the room with the letter in hand, she had known that something had shifted within the family dynamic. But she had not been prepared for the full force of the consequences that would follow. Camilla had always been a resilient woman. She had weathered years of public condemnation, endured scathing media attacks, and fought her way to the position she now held as queen consort. Her relationship with Charles, though once controversial, had ultimately earned her acceptance in the eyes of many, including the British public. She had fought hard for this moment, and it had taken years of careful maneuvering, both within the palace and in the media, to secure her place beside Charles as his equal. But now, it seemed as though all her efforts were in jeopardy. When William had asked to meet with her privately, Camilla had sensed the gravity of the conversation. She had been hoping, even praying, that the tensions between her and William could be mended, that perhaps, in time, she would win his full trust and acceptance. She knew their relationship had always been strained, but she had hoped that the years of royal duty, of shared family moments, would have softened his heart. Yet, here she was, staring down the possibility that everything she had worked for could be undone in an instant. As William sat across from her, his face solemn, the weight of the situation settled in. The letter, now sitting on the table between them, had changed everything. Camilla's eyes flicked nervously to the envelope, but she didn't need to read it to know what it contained. The look in William's eyes, the coldness that had replaced the respectful distance they had once shared, told her everything she needed to know. For a brief moment, she felt the panic rising in her chest, but she quickly suppressed it. Camilla had always been a woman who could keep her composure, no matter how dire the circumstances. She had learned, long ago, that the royal family was a game of perception, and she had spent years cultivating an image of poise, control, and unshakable loyalty to the crown. She wasn't about to lose that now. "William, what is this about?" Camilla's voice was calm, but beneath it, there was a note of uncertainty. "I'm afraid this is something we can't ignore," William replied, his voice steady, but his words carrying the weight of a decision that would forever change their family. "This letter, it contains information that has come to light about your actions over the years. Actions that I cannot ignore any longer." Camilla's heart skipped a beat. She had known, of course, that there had always been whispers. She had never fully trusted the people around her, the palace insiders who had always seemed to hold their own secrets close to their chests. But to have those whispers turn into accusations, this was something she had not anticipated. "What actions, William?" Camilla asked, her voice steady but her mind racing. She had spent years building her reputation as a strong, capable queen consort. The idea that her role could be undermined by a single letter, a single accusation, was unfathomable to her. William leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "The letter speaks of things I never imagined," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "It reveals your involvement in decisions that have harmed our family, decisions that I believe you made with the intent of protecting your own position at the cost of my mother's." The words hit Camilla like a slap in the face. She felt the blood drain from her face as she processed what William was saying. Her first instinct was to defend herself, to explain her actions and motivations. But as she looked into William's eyes, she saw something she had not expected: a man who had been wounded, a man who had spent years carrying the weight of his mother's death and the damage that had been done to her legacy. In that moment, Camilla realized that this was not just about the letter. It was about the emotional betrayal that William had felt for years. She had known, of course, that her relationship with Charles had caused William pain, but she had never fully understood the depth of that pain until now. The truth of what had happened, the real damage that had been done to Diana's memory, was something William had carried in silence. And now, with this letter, it had all come rushing to the surface. "You don't understand, William," Camilla said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I never wanted to hurt your mother. I never wanted any of this. I did what I had to do to survive, to secure my place in a world that was cruel and unforgiving. But I never meant to cause anyone harm." William's face softened for a brief moment, but he remained firm. "It's not just about the past, Camilla. It's about what's been hidden from the public for so long. The truth cannot stay buried any longer." For a long moment, Camilla was silent. She knew what was coming next, the decision that would forever alter her life. She had spent years carefully navigating the treacherous waters of royal politics, building alliances, and protecting her image. But now, it seemed that all her efforts were for nothing. "Is this it then?" Camilla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're going to strip me of my title? You're going to take everything I've worked for?" William's eyes were filled with sorrow. "It's not just about the title, Camilla. It's about the truth. And the truth is that your actions have caused too much harm to our family and to the monarchy. The crown cannot survive if we continue to hide the truth. As much as I wish this wasn't the case, I cannot ignore it any longer." The finality of William's words hung in the air, and for the first time, Camilla felt the weight of her years in the royal family crashing down on her. She had fought so hard to get to where she was, to secure her place beside Charles as queen consort. But now, it seemed that all of that was slipping through her fingers. In the silence that followed, Camilla realized that nothing would ever be the same again. She had lost not only the respect of her stepson, but the very title that had defined her position in the royal family. And as the tears welled up in her eyes, she couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. The royal palace, a symbol of power and tradition, had long been a place of whispers and secrets. It was an institution built on the careful curation of public image and the maintenance of family unity, often at the expense of personal truths. But on this particular day, the walls that had protected the royal family's secrets for so long would be shattered. And it was Prince William who would deliver the blow. After days of tense deliberations, hours spent weighing the consequences of his decision, William knew there could be no turning back. The moment had arrived for him to make the truth known, not just to his family, but to the world. The burden of the monarchy, of his future as king, was more than just a title. It was a responsibility to uphold not only the crown, but the very integrity of the royal family. The decision to strip Queen Camilla of her title as queen consort was not one he had taken lightly. Yet, as he stood before the cameras and the gathered royal advisors, he understood that this was the only course of action that could preserve the monarchy's future. As he prepared to make the announcement, the weight of the moment settled in. The eyes of the world would be upon him, and with that gaze came an immense pressure. For years, the royal family had fought to maintain a semblance of unity, but today, that facade would crumble. The public would finally learn the truth about Camilla's past, and the monarchy's carefully curated image would be forever altered. The meeting was held in the Grand Hall of Buckingham Palace, a place that had witnessed many significant moments in history. Today, it would host one more. William's hands were steady as he prepared to speak, though his heart raced with the knowledge of the far-reaching consequences of his words. Camilla, sitting nearby, was quiet, her face pale and drawn. The weight of her actions, the revelations that had surfaced, had left her visibly shaken. But she was not one to show weakness. Even now, as her life hung in the balance, she held her head high, her pride intact, though it was clear that her world had already begun to unravel. When the room quieted, William stood, his posture regal and composed. The room fell silent as he began to speak, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," William began, "today, I stand before you with a heavy heart. It is not an easy thing to make decisions that will affect the future of our family and the monarchy, but the truth, no matter how painful, must always prevail." He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "It is with a great sense of responsibility that I announce the decision to strip Camilla of her title as queen consort. This decision comes after careful consideration and in light of recent revelations that cannot be ignored. The integrity of the monarchy must be preserved, and in doing so, it is necessary to confront the actions of the past." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The silence that followed was palpable. No one had expected this announcement, not even the closest members of the royal family. Camilla's face, which had remained composed until now, faltered. Her eyes, once filled with defiance, now betrayed a flicker of shock. She had never imagined that this day would come. She had always believed that her position as queen consort was secure, that the loyalty of her husband, Charles, would protect her. But now, with William's words hanging in the air, it was clear that everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers. William continued, his voice firm but empathetic. "This is not a decision made out of malice, but out of necessity. The monarchy has always been built on a foundation of duty, integrity, and transparency. It is time for us to be honest with the public and with ourselves. The truth cannot be hidden any longer, and the damage caused by actions that have been kept in the shadows must be acknowledged." Camilla sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the floor. The weight of the situation, the public humiliation, was overwhelming. She had always known that her position as queen consort was precarious, but she had never thought it would end like this. She had fought so hard to secure her place, to overcome the years of public scorn and criticism, and now it seemed as though all her efforts had been for nothing. As the room absorbed William's words, the tension was almost unbearable. The royal advisors, once firmly aligned with Camilla, now found themselves divided. Some were stunned into silence, unsure of how to respond. Others, though visibly uncomfortable, remained supportive of William's decision. They knew that, as much as this would cause turmoil within the royal family, it was ultimately the right course of action. The monarchy could not afford to continue down a path of secrecy and deception. The media, too, was quick to react. News outlets across the world picked up the story almost immediately, with headlines proclaiming the shocking turn of events. The British public, who had long been divided on the issue of Camilla's position, now found themselves grappling with the reality of the monarchy's most significant shakeup in decades. Supporters of William hailed his decision as a bold step toward transparency and accountability, while critics decried it as a betrayal, a public dismantling of the very woman who had stood by Charles's side for so many years. The fallout was immediate. Television networks scrambled to provide analysis and commentary, with royal experts weighing in on the potential impact of the decision. Social media erupted with a flood of opinions, with some expressing shock and disbelief, while others praised William's courage in confronting the truth. Camilla, once beloved by a segment of the public for her resilience, now found herself the subject of scorn and ridicule. The next few days were filled with interviews, statements, and counterstatements from various members of the royal family. Charles, who had been visibly shaken by his son's decision, issued a brief statement in support of his wife, though it was clear that he was struggling to come to terms with the fallout. "I stand by Camilla," he said, his voice somber, "but I understand the need for this decision. Our family is going through a difficult time, and we must all work together to ensure the monarchy's future." But even as Charles offered his support, it was evident that the unity of the royal family had been shattered. The relationship between father and son, once strong and unshakable, was now fraught with tension. The cracks in the family's facade had become too large to ignore, and no amount of public statements could fix the damage that had been done. For Camilla, the days that followed were a blur. She retreated from the public eye, no longer the regal figure she had once been, but a woman struggling to come to terms with the reality of her situation. The title that had once defined her was now gone, stripped away by the very son of the man she had married. Her future, once so secure, was now uncertain. In the end, William's decision had irrevocably changed the course of the monarchy. It was a decision that had been years in the making, a culmination of secrets, betrayals, and personal struggles. And as the royal family faced the aftermath, they knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The moment the announcement was made, the royal family was thrust into a storm of controversy. The weight of Prince William's decision to strip Queen Camilla of her title reverberated not just within the walls of Buckingham Palace, but across the entire nation. For decades, the British monarchy had been seen as a pillar of stability, an institution built on tradition, unity, and duty. But in that one moment, that carefully constructed image was shattered.